My name is Valeria Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and I've spent nearly half my life trying to become the kind of daughter my parents could be proud of. But on the night that was supposed to mark the beginning of a joyful journey, I came to a harsh realization. Not everyone wants to see you happy. Our engagement party, mine and Elijah's, was held at Rosewood Garden, a restaurant in the suburbs of Napa, California. The venue was softly lit by hundreds of string lights suspended from the ceiling. Every table was adorned with pristine white peonies, and champagne glasses never went empty. It was exactly what we'd dreamed of. Elijah, the man who had stood by me for over 3 years, stood next to me, his gaze full of warmth. A quiet, steadfast documentary filmmaker, his kindness had kept me grounded through every wound my family left behind. Everyone was there. Coworkers, close friends, extended family. Everyone smiled, everyone congratulated us, except for one table, my family's. My mother, Cheryl, sat front and center, dressed in a striking red gown like she was the main character. My father, Howard, silently sipped wine, his gaze distant like he was trapped in a celebration he wanted no part of. Then there was Emily, my younger sister, too engrossed in her phone to look up at me even once. She was only 27, but behaved like an 18-year-old used to being served by the world. I took a deep breath, determined not to let the past intrude on my present. This was my day, not theirs. I don't know what made my mother stand up. She gently tapped her wine glass with a silver spoon, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, the blonde woman with a commanding posture, like a mayor about to make a public decree. First, my mother said, I want to congratulate Valeria and Elijah. May your marriage be filled with love. Applause followed. Elijah squeezed my hand beneath the table, and for a moment, I almost believed this time might be different. I was wrong. And I also have an important announcement, she continued, her tone colder than the crystal lights above us. After careful consideration, Howard and I have decided to transfer the wedding fund we had set aside for Valeria, $35,000 to Emily. The air left the room. Someone coughed. I thought I must have misheard. I let out a short laugh, trying to keep my tone light. You're joking, right? That money was transferred into my account 2 years ago. Elijah and I already used it to put a down payment on our home, hire the photographer, and secure the venue. My mother's face hardened. You can say whatever you want, but Emily needs it more. Her fiancé is unemployed, and their wedding is coming up sooner. They need support. No, I answered, my voice shaking with anger. Emily got the exact same amount as I did, but she blew it on designer bags and a vacation to Bali. I am not this family's ATM. Emily shot to her feet, knocking her chair over. Excuse me? You think you're better than me? Stop pretending you're so righteous. I stood up, locking eyes with her. I'm not pretending, I'm just not stupid. My mother's face turned crimson. She stormed toward me, and before I could react, her hand came down hard across my face like a bolt of lightning. The sharp crack echoed through the room. I staggered, my lips clenched, eyes burning, not just from pain, but from humiliation. The restaurant went silent. I lifted my head and stared at the woman who gave birth to me. You don't have the right to do that, not now, not in front of everyone I love. A chair scraped and someone made a phone call. Yes, police, there's been an assault at Rosewood Garden. Elijah gripped my hand tightly. Emily stepped back, visibly shaken. My father remained seated, offering no words, no defense. 10 minutes later, the doors burst open. 2 officers entered, their faces serious. Ma'am, are you the one who was assaulted? I nodded. Yes. I was slapped. I sat silently in the patrol car, my hand resting on the cheek that still stung. The flashing lights reflected off the window in bursts of color, dizzying and sharp. Elijah sat close beside me, his hand gently placed on my leg, saying nothing, just quietly sharing the ache that had risen and lodged itself in my throat. The image of my mother being handcuffed in front of dozens of stunned guests, the shocked stares, the click of a server's camera capturing it all, felt like shards cutting deeper into a wound that had been bleeding for years. But tonight's slap didn't begin at that dinner table. It started many years ago, in a different place, a small wooden house in northern Minneapolis, where I grew up as the daughter who could take care of herself. My mother, Cheryl, was a high school teacher, strict and difficult. My father, Howard, was an accountant for a construction firm, quiet and always avoiding conflict. They weren't cruel, at least not in any obvious way. They just chose to love Emily more. I'm 5 years older than Emily. From a young age, I was taught to lead by example, to give in, to be the more sensible one. When I got an A, my mother barely nodded. Well, that's expected from the older child. But when Emily earned a B+, the whole family went out to celebrate. I applied for scholarships, handled it all myself. Emily enrolled in an expensive art school, and my mother immediately co-signed her financial aid. She has talent. It's worth investing in, she said, eyes glowing like she'd discovered the next Picasso. When I turned 18, my parents opened 2 separate accounts, one for me and one for Emily. Each had $15,000, their life savings, meant to start adult life. I used mine to attend a public university, worked part-time, lived frugally, and graduated 4 years later debt-free. Emily, she spent $5,000 on a trendy camera, enrolled in a 3-month film course, and used the rest to put down a deposit on a downtown apartment, because she said she needed a creative atmosphere. Less than a year later, Emily was back living at home. The apartment was taken back due to missed rent. The camera was sold for less than half its original price. When I asked, "Why didn't you save, like Mom always told us to?" my mother gave me a disapproving look. "Your sister is lost. She needs love, not judgment. You're different. You're always strong." I once believed that being independent was something my parents would be proud of. But in their eyes, it was proof that I didn't need them. So I wasn't worthy of full love. After college, I got a job at a media company, worked my way up to project manager, and saved every dollar I could for the future. When I turned 29, I opened a new account and began setting aside money, not to boast, but to protect what I had built. That's the same account my mother tried to reassign to Emily tonight as a wedding gift. Once, I overheard my mother telling a neighbor, "Valeria, she's more like an outsider. She handles everything on her own, but Emily is the heart of this family." I sat in my room for hours after hearing that. The feeling of being excluded, pushed out of what should have been sacred, a mother's love, was colder than a Minnesota winter. Then I met Elijah. He never asked why I wasn't close to my family. He just stayed. Quietly, patiently. When I told him about the wedding fund my parents had promised me, he smiled and said, "Whether you get that money or not, doesn't matter. What matters is you didn't start from nothing. You started from yourself. That's your power." And yet tonight, my mother erased every effort, every boundary I'd carefully set to protect myself. She didn't strike me because I was wrong. She struck me because I refused to obey. I stared out the window as the streets passed like a silent reel of film. Inside, what rose wasn't pain anymore. It was something stronger, a growing resolve. I won't let the past pull me back again. 3 days after the engagement party turned into a nightmare, I found an ivory envelope in my mailbox, stamped with the logo of a law firm based in Denver. My heart pounded when I saw the sender, Cheryl and Howard Monroe, via legal representative. I opened the letter with trembling hands. The first line made my stomach drop. Notice of lawsuit. Request for the return of $35,000, allegedly transferred in error to the defendant, Valeria Monroe. I dropped the letter onto the kitchen table, vision darkening. Elijah stepped in, scanned a few lines, then looked at me with unfiltered rage. I've never seen anything more ridiculous in my life. I gave a dry laugh. Absurdity is the Monroe family's specialty. That afternoon, I called an old friend, Kayla Bennett, a college classmate who now worked at a law firm specializing in personal finance and civil disputes. We met at a small coffee shop near Union Station where I laid everything out. The money my parents had transferred to my account 2 years ago, and everything that had unfolded at the engagement party. Kayla raised her eyebrows. Transferred by mistake? They really wrote that? I nodded, handing her a photocopy of the letter. She read it carefully, then set it down, her voice firm. "Valeria, that money was deposited into your personal account under your name with no attached conditions. They're calling it a mistake only because now they regret not giving it to Emily instead. This is clearly an intimidation tactic, more than a legitimate claim." "I know," I said quietly. But I can't let it go. This isn't just about money. It's about the right to make decisions for my own life. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing was held at the Jefferson County Courthouse. I sat beside Kayla, wearing a charcoal gray suit, clutching my notebook. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their attorney, a silver-haired man named Mr. Langford, who looked like he dealt with corporate mergers, not family drama. Emily was there too. She wore a pricey dress, legs crossed with theatrical elegance, eyes glued to her phone. She never once looked my way. When the judge entered, the room tensed. After introductions, Kayla opened calmly but firmly. Your Honor, the $35,000 in question was voluntarily deposited by the plaintiffs into my client's account in April of last year. No contract, no written stipulations. The funds were described as a family gift for her engagement and were used accordingly for wedding expenses and a home down payment. Mr. Langford stood. Your Honor, the plaintiffs made the transfer with the understanding that the money would be used for the good of the family, not to cause division. Circumstances have changed. They are within their rights to request an adjustment. Ella didn't hesitate. Changing circumstances don't create retroactive claims on gifted funds. If the law worked that way, no one would ever accept a gift again. The judge nodded, taking notes rapidly. Then it was Emily's turn to testify. She stepped up with annoying confidence. My sister is always selfish, she said with a smirk. I needed help, but she clung to that money like it was her lifeline. Kayla raised an eyebrow. Miss Emily, is it true that you also received a similar amount of money from your parents? Emily hesitated. Yes, but my situation is different. I don't have a stable job like she does. And how did you spend your funds? Living expenses, some investments, travel. Can you be more specific? A camera? A course, a trip to Italy. But that's irrelevant. Kayla smiled faintly. On the contrary, it's highly relevant. It shows a clear difference in how each sister handled their funds. And my client's responsible use of that money cannot be twisted into a justification for taking it away from her. The room fell silent. I saw my father fidget with his pen while my mother bit her lip, her expression beginning to crack. The hearing ended in a heavy silence. The judge didn't issue a ruling yet, but I could feel the tide shifting. On the courthouse steps, Elijah pulled me into a tight hug. You did amazing, he whispered. No matter what they try next, you're the one writing this story. I looked toward my parents hurrying to their car, their shadows stretching long in the evening light. Inside me, the fear had finally given way to a cold, clear sense of control. I thought that after the initial hearing, my family would back off, or at least try to save face. But I had underestimated my mother's pride and her desperate need for control. Cheryl Monroe. On Tuesday afternoon, while I was in a Zoom meeting with the design team, my phone lit up nonstop. 13 missed calls from Aunt Bonnie, 3 texts from my cousin Caleb, and 1 email from an unfamiliar address with a subject line that simply read, "Is this true?" I opened the inbox and nearly dropped my phone. Attached to the email was a photo of Elijah hugging an unfamiliar brunette woman outside a cafe in Boulder. The shot was a little blurry, but the lighting and composition made it look very real. The sender wrote, "I'm sorry, Valeria. I didn't know how else to tell you this. Elijah hasn't been honest with you. Maybe you should know before things go too far." I knew immediately this wasn't some random email. It had been sent to valeria.events@gmail.com. Not my personal email, but the one I used specifically for wedding bookings, and only a few close people had access to it. A chill ran down my spine. I forwarded the photo to Elijah with one short question. Do you know this person? Less than a minute later, he called. "Elle," I answered, my throat dry. "Tell me this isn't real." "Val," he replied instantly, firm and clear. "You really think I'd do something like that? Look closely. The shadow's all wrong, and my right hand doesn't have the scar in that photo." I zoomed in. He was right. The wrist in the picture was smooth. Elijah had a small burn scar from childhood. "Who do you think did this?" I asked, though deep down, I already had a hunch. "Ellie. Or someone your mom paid. And I bet this won't be the last of it." He was right. In the next 2 days, I received 3 more emails from anonymous addresses, each one using a different tone. One pretended to be sympathetic. Another threatened to expose the truth if I didn't leave Elijah to protect my dignity. Then, a few old friends started messaging me, asking why I had told them the wedding was canceled. They sent me screenshots of an email from me, sent from a lookalike address, stating, "Valeria and Elijah regret to inform you the wedding will not proceed due to personal reasons. Please keep this information private." I rushed to post a public clarification on my social media, explaining that the wedding was not canceled and that any emails not from the official address were fake. But I knew the damage had already been done. The gossip had spread among relatives and close friends. Elijah suggested hiring an IT specialist to trace the email origins. He also changed the passwords to all of our accounts, enabling two-factor authentication on every platform. When the specialist reported that several IP addresses tied to the fake accounts came from the same area, an outer suburb where my parents lived, I had no more doubt. Emily, only she could pull something like this without even feeling ashamed. That night, I called Aunt Bonnie, the only family member who ever took my side. After I told her everything, she sighed. "Valeria," she said, "I think Cheryl does this because she loves Emily. But the way she loves? It's twisted. She doesn't know the difference between protecting someone and hurting them." "What about Emily?" I asked. "What does she think will happen after all this? That I'll cancel the wedding and just hand her the money?" "She's never lived in the real world. She's been coddled so much she thinks everyone's supposed to rescue her from her own mistakes." I hung up, my mind spinning. The next morning, Elijah and I sent an official email to all the guests, correcting the rumor and asking them to reconfirm their attendance through our new wedding website, one with tighter security and access control. We also hired a legal firm that specializes in cybercrime to handle the impersonation and prepare lawsuits if needed. When I told Kayla what had happened, she just nodded quietly. "This isn't about money anymore. This is a battle for your dignity." She was right, and I knew. If they were willing to fabricate a cheating scandal about Elijah, then there were no lines they wouldn't cross. I had to stay one step ahead. The morning of our wedding, the Colorado sky was unnaturally clear, with cotton-like clouds drifting above Stonebridge Ranch, where Elijah and I were about to get married. The green fields stretched to the horizon, dotted with blooming lavender. Everything was exactly as planned, down to the smallest detail. I sat in a small wooden room on the hillside, set up as the bridal suite. Lily, my maid of honor and best friend since college, was touching up my lipstick. "Val," she whispered, squeezing my hand tight, "this is your day. Don't let anyone take that from you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The past few days had been a storm. Lawsuits, impersonations, rumors. But today, I wasn't letting anything stand between me and the man I loved. A soft knock at the door. One of the private security staff we'd hired stepped in. His voice was low, but serious enough to send a chill down my spine. "Miss Monroe, someone tried to enter the ceremony area through the delivery path by the kitchen. She claimed to be your cousin, but her name's not on the guest list." I stared at him. "What's her name?" "Emily Monroe," he replied. Lily shot up. "She actually showed up?" She had a large tote bag. Inside, we found a spray can, bright red. We stopped her just in time and escorted her off the property. My whole body froze for a second. I closed my eyes, steadied my breath, then asked, "Did she say anything?" "She kept repeating that you don't deserve a perfect day." I stood up, gripping the ivory lace of my gown. "Just follow protocol. No need to call the police. Just make sure she doesn't come back, and recheck all entry points." "Yes, ma'am." He gave a polite nod and left. Lily clutched my hand. "She seriously needs help." I let out a soft laugh, my eyes now dry. "No. She has envy that's been fed for years by indulgence. That's all." 15 minutes later, the prelude music began playing outside. I stepped out in my sweet white dress, the train brushing along the stone path sprinkled with lavender petals. A gentle breeze played with my hair, carrying the scent of pine wood and morning sunlight. I had no father by my side. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't apologized. I no longer expected it. But waiting at the base of the stairs was Uncle Rupert, my mother's youngest brother, the only man in the family who had stood up for me since I was little. He smiled warmly. "Ready, little bride?" I nodded. "I've always been ready, just never had the chance." We walked forward. Whispers, camera shutters, and the loving eyes of friends made me feel more at peace than any blessing ever could. The guests rose, and when I saw Elijah at the end of the aisle, smiling, eyes slightly glassy, I knew that even if Emily had dumped a whole bucket of paint on this day, she still wouldn't be able to steal what mattered most. We exchanged vows beneath a white wooden arch laced with asters, climbing roses, and burlap ribbons. Elijah said, "I vow to choose you every day, even when life isn't as easy as today." I replied, my voice trembling, "I can't promise perfection, but I promise to walk beside you, even when the world turns against us." Applause filled the air as the officiant declared, "You are now husband and wife," but to me that moment wasn't the beginning, it was a rebirth. At the reception, I received dozens of warm wishes from friends, co-workers, even relatives who once took my mother's side. A few leaned in and whispered, "I was wrong about you. You deserve better than what they said." I simply nodded and smiled. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The truth had spoken for itself. And today, bathed in golden light, my fingers laced with Elijah's, I knew I had truly won. Not through anger, not through revenge, but by staying true to myself and marrying the man I love, in sunlight, in white, with a heart no longer afraid. 2 months after Elijah and I got married, just as life was settling into its new rhythm, I received an unexpected phone call from Uncle Rupert, nearly 10 o'clock at night. It was short, and his voice was hesitant. "Valeria, I think you should know. Your parents lost the house in Lakewood." I sat up straight, gripping the phone tightly. They got foreclosed? The bank issued a lockout notice this afternoon. They owe over $100,000. I'm not sure who they borrowed from, but I heard it was a private lender, with steep interest. I was silent for a few seconds. Uncle Rupert continued, voice heavy. "They've temporarily moved in with Emily, but it doesn't seem easy." I hung up, my mind in knots. Even after everything they'd done, disowning me, attacking me, smearing my name, I couldn't feel satisfaction. There wasn't a part of me that wanted to see them suffer. But the truth was, they'd chosen this path, and I knew exactly why they were in debt: Emily's wedding. A month ago, I'd heard scattered rumors from a few old friends that Emily was planning her wedding at a 5-star resort near Aspen, where just the venue rental cost more than $40,000. Gold foil invitations, a menu of high-end European cuisine, a custom gown from Italy, and 4 layers of bridesmaids, all paid for from top to bottom. Elijah looked at me then and sighed. "Where do you think they're getting that kind of money?" I'd guessed right. They weren't getting it. They were borrowing it. And as always, they believed Emily deserved it all. I'd lived under that mindset long enough to understand. To my mother, Emily was never someone who had to pay the price. As long as she was happy, any cost was justifiable. 3 days later, I ran into Aunt Marlene, my mom's cousin, at a conference at the city's cultural center. After some polite small talk, she lowered her voice. "You've heard about the house, haven't you? Cheryl hasn't told anyone, but a few neighbors saw the moving truck and bank officials come by." I nodded. "I know. But I have no idea how they plan to live now." She shrugged. "Emily's the same. Blaming timing, blaming the economy. But Howard? He looks 10 years older." I lowered my gaze, heart heavy. That night, I lay on the sofa watching the warm lights reflect across the ceiling. Elijah was cooking dinner, and I couldn't stop thinking about the years I spent in that house. The cold dinners, the words swallowed, the feeling of never being enough. I didn't hate my parents. I was just tired. Tired of being responsible for things I didn't cause. Tired of being labeled the cold daughter, just because I refused to break myself trying to save a family that had pushed me aside over and over. When Elijah sat beside me and handed me a mug of hot ginger tea, I leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "They've lost everything, and Emily still hasn't changed. I don't think they're even sorry." He gently squeezed my hand. "It's not your fault. People reap what they sow. And you walked away at the right time." A week later, I received a handwritten letter. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was my father's. In it, he wrote, briefly, "Valeria, I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm sorry for staying silent too long. Everything's different now. If you ever want to talk, I'm still here." I read it 3 times. No anger, no tears, no clear emotion, just a quiet, dull ache inside. I placed the letter on the table, watching it under the light. That apology came too late, but that didn't mean it held no value. Still, I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again. Not because I was bitter, but because I understood now forgiveness is a journey, not a reflex. And I couldn't rush into it just because they had nothing left. I needed them to change. But more than that, I needed my own freedom. And sometimes that begins with the decision to stop repeating the cycles they spent their lives trapped in. About a month after I received my father's handwritten letter, one quiet weekend afternoon, I was tending to the newly planted lavender on our balcony when the doorbell rang. Elijah was in the kitchen, but I was already walking toward the front door. On the video screen was a familiar face, gaunt, aged by at least 5 years. My father. I opened the door, standing between the wooden frame and the fading light of late afternoon. He held his baseball cap in both hands, his eyes unable to meet mine. "Valeria, I know you don't want to see me, but I'm asking for 5 minutes. If you tell me to leave after that, I will." I didn't say anything. I simply stepped aside. He crossed the threshold like it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. We sat in the living room where the light from the large window streamed across the oak coffee table. My father was silent for a long time, still clutching his cap, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm not here to justify anything," he began, his voice low and tired. "I'm here because I can't stay silent any longer." I crossed my arms and leaned back into the chair, waiting for him to continue. "I know. I made a lot of mistakes. When your mother tore you down, I said nothing. When Emily was given everything unfairly, I stayed quiet. I chose to avoid conflict, to keep the peace at home. But the price I paid was losing you." I took a slow breath. "And now that Mom and Emily have fallen apart, you finally see it?" He nodded without flinching. "Yes. Because there's nothing left to cloud my vision. Everything has fallen away. All that's left is the truth." He pulled an old photo from his shirt pocket. Me, as a child, about 8 years old, grinning next to a Christmas tree, hugging a thick book he once gave me. "You were always strong," he said, his eyes rimmed red. "And maybe that's why I felt safe thinking you didn't need me. But I was wrong. Being strong doesn't mean you don't need love." I looked at the photo, then at him. Something had shifted. Not just the tiredness in his face, but the quiet in his gaze. It wasn't the familiar avoidance anymore. For the first time, he was willing to face it. "I can't forget everything overnight, and I won't lie to myself," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm open to starting over, if you're willing to show up as a real adult this time." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing with emotion. "Here's nothing I want more. But I have conditions," I added firmly. "No more dragging me into anything involving Mom and Emily. No requests for help, no guilt about being the big sister. If you want to be in my life, it has to be about me, no one else." He nodded without hesitation. "I agree." I poured him a cup of tea and we began a slow conversation, one that didn't dwell on pain, but didn't deny the past either. He told me about working overnight security shifts to pay off the final debt from Emily's wedding, about the endless fights with my mother after they lost the house, and the sleepless nights filled with self-doubt. I didn't cry, I just listened. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel the need to brace myself around the man who had once disappointed me most. When he stood to leave, his eyes no longer avoided mine like they had when he arrived. "Valeria," he said, his hand resting on my shoulder, "thank you for giving me a chance. I won't make you regret it." I nodded, offering no promises. "I'll be watching. And if you truly mean what you say, maybe someday we'll have a family again, the way it should have been from the start." The door closed behind him, but inside me another door cracked open. Not wide, but just enough for light to seep through. I knew this journey wouldn't be easy. But at least this time, I wasn't walking it alone, and more importantly, I was the one setting the terms, no longer the one silently enduring. One early spring morning, when the sunlight still wasn't warm enough to chase away the thin mist covering the suburbs of Denver, I carried my little daughter out onto the balcony, where the pots of purple lavender stood resilient after the long winter. Her name is Aria, a name that means melody, because ever since I was pregnant, I felt like she was a gentle song, healing all the cracks in my heart. Elijah named her one quiet evening when he whispered, "This little girl won't grow up in rivalry, resentment, or pretense. Our daughter will grow up with truth, love, and things that don't have to be earned through pain." I believed that. Because we built everything from scratch, a small family, not perfect, but real. After Arya was born, all my priorities changed. The insults from Emily, my mother's cold silence, they all began to fade when I first saw my baby. Red, tiny, but with eyes full of unexpected strength. Elijah sat beside me, tears falling silently as she wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. No one had to earn love anymore. No one had to fight to be acknowledged. I used to think I'd have to give up so much just to feel that. Turns out, I only needed to learn how to choose again. Choose who to keep, choose who to let go. That evening, while Elijah was cooking our favorite pasta and Arya slept peacefully in her bassinet, my phone rang. An unknown number, still with a Colorado area code. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "Valeria?" That voice froze me in place. Even after nearly a year, I knew instantly, Emily. I said nothing. She didn't either. Then she exhaled, long and slow. "I know you don't want to hear my voice, but I had to try." I stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the wall clock. "I've lost more than you think. The house, friends, my fiancé left too, and Mom is sick. Dad, he won't talk to me anymore." Still, I said nothing, not out of anger, but because I was watching, to see whether she called out of real remorse or sheer desperation. "I'm sorry," she continued, this time her voice smaller, shaking. "I was wrong. About everything. The engagement party, the fake emails, the lies. I did all of it because I was afraid of losing face. Afraid of being compared. Afraid you'd be happier than me. I can't undo it, but I just wanted you to know I really regret it." I looked out at the balcony where sunlight spilled across the railing. I remembered it all. The stabs in the back, the sleepless nights, the times I almost texted her just one line, "Why?" but couldn't bring myself to hit send. Now she was saying it out loud, but I wasn't the same Valeria anymore. "Thank you for calling," I said slowly. "An apology can't erase the pain, but it can be a beginning if it's followed by action." The line went quiet. "I'm not promising forgiveness," I added. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a journey. And you won't walk it beside me, Emily, if you still see yourself as the victim." She choked back a sob. "I understand. I hope you mean it this time. But I don't need to verify that today. Just live true to what you said. If one day you really change, I'll know." I ended the call with a quiet goodbye, then set the phone down on the table. Elijah walked in, his eyes silently asking. I gave him a faint smile. "Emily." He didn't say a word, just sat beside me, resting his hand on mine. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I answered, feeling weightless. "I don't need anyone to fix the past for me to live in peace. I just need to know I'm walking the right path." I turned to look at Arya. Her eyes were open now, deep brown irises glowing in the golden light. "My daughter won't grow up carrying the wounds I once did. She will know that love isn't something to be clawed at through pain. The old story is over, and I, Valeria Monroe, am finally living the way I was always meant to, with freedom, peace, and trust in myself. My story isn't just a journey of breaking free from favoritism and family wounds. It's proof that true happiness comes from choosing the right people to keep in your life. I've learned how to set boundaries, stand up for my worth, and build a family based on love, not obligation. Forgiveness is a process, not a reflex, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to let go of the past so you can fully live the present you truly deserve. What do you think about Valeria's decision? Would you choose to forgive like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family, choices, and freedom in life.